All right. So the curse of starting at 6:05 seems to keep going strong. Um, anyway, we're in Revelation chapter 13. Once we finish up chapters 13 and 14, we will be done with this particular lesson and ready to move on to the 7 bowls. That being said, Ray, would you lead us in an opening prayer?
Heavenly Father, as we gather together this evening to study more of your word, we pray that you will be with us and watch over us and help Caleb to have recall of what he wants to bring to us tonight. Please open our minds that we may absorb it. And Father, we pray for those, for a number who are not here. And, pray for a number of our fellow Christians that are sick and hurting, that you would place your healing hand upon them. We pray these things in Christ's holy name. Amen.
All right. So, 2 weeks ago, we have the woman and the dragon. The woman is clothed in the sun. She rides on the moon. The stars line her hair and head. There's 12 of them. This is, of course, a reference to Joseph's dream about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And the sun, the moon, and the stars represent the people of Israel, both Israel and his children. And so, therefore, the woman represents God's children, the spiritual children of Israel. She is pregnant and is fleeing from a dragon. It's a red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems. His destruction is full of malice, bold, and he is often subtle. Her son, when he is born, is caught up to heaven. And the dragon is defeated by Michael and cast down to earth, where the woman now lives. She flees and is aided by God in all of his creation. And despite, however, crafty the dragon is or thinks that he is, he cannot reach her. Which leads us into chapter 13, where the dragon begins to make servants for himself to go and to catch the woman for him, since he is not permitted to. This, of course, is doomed to failure, since anything that he creates is restricted the same way that he is. But the beast has 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and his authority, and great authority. And of course, we noted that we noted what the 10 horns meant. Does anyone remember? What's the significance of 7 heads and 10 horns? Since it appears on both the dragon and the beast.
Joseph's brothers.
No.
Okay.
Who's good step?
Yeah. What? All right. So 10 means complete. And what does horns represent? Okay, so 7 means perfection. Well, let's back up. We know what the dragon is. The dragon's Satan. So why does Satan have 7 heads? And why does he have 10 horns on the heads? All right. Um, so horns represent strength due to their connection with oxen. I mean, most of the time, anything that has like horns that it specifically uses to like headbutt with, you know, they're generally pretty strong. Those horns. I don't think anyone's ever called getting hit by a headbutting goat particularly enjoyable, even if the goat's not quite big enough maybe to knock you down. And so horns tend to represent strength in that way. And so if you have 10 of them, it's sort of a complete strength. It's not like a godly sort of strength, but it's a complete strength. So what strength he's been given is complete. So whatever domain he is given control over, he can exercise full authority on it. Which incidentally is also what the diadems and the heads represent. So the heads can represent wisdom, being that's sort of your thinking part. And so although Satan is not necessarily the most righteous of individuals, he is very intelligent and crafty and knowledgeable. He's not to be underestimated. And he does have authority, and it is from God. So it's not false authority. But the beast, with the 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 diadems, well, it's very, it's very reminiscent of the dragon, even though it's a cat. So it's not Satan. It's not the dragon. But its form is like the dragon, in that it has 10 heads, or 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems. And so it is deriving its authority, instead of from God, it's deriving its authority from Satan, the dragon, which means that it is a false authority. And that's further illustrated by the fact that it has blasphemous names on its heads. And so its heads and horns and diadems are all a mockery of sort of the real thing. Most of the time, except for the futurists, the premillennials, the beast is taken to represent a government of some kind. The preterist will either think that it's Jerusalem or Rome. The historists, I believe, tend to view it as Rome. And the idealists view it as any government that has formed itself after Satan rather than forming itself after God. The futurists believe this to be the Antichrist, which comes from a misunderstanding of the Antichrist not as an idea, but as an actual person. And a conflating the Antichrist with the man of perdition. The man of perdition does seem to be an actual person or group of people, so like a lineage of some kind. And the Antichrist, rather, is anyone who's Antichrist. So it's not some being with great mystical powers on par with Christ. It's just they don't like Christ. And so if you're Antichrist, you're an Antichrist. It's not some beast that rises out of the sea and wages war on all creation. But the beast is given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. He's allowed to exercise the authority, the fake authority, for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling. That is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it's allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority is given to it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone's to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone's to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here's the call of endurance and the faith of the saints. All right. So, any questions or comments on the beast from the sea here?
There doesn't seem to be a lot of governments that form themselves after God anymore.
Have there ever been?
Maybe way back.
I would say the rule historically is that governments don't form themselves after God. And the ones that do eventually stop. And so what we have here is sort of an image of a government that may at one time have been godly, but has since, or at least not demonic, but has since given up more proper things for more spiritually dead things, if that makes sense. And that can be any number of things, right? It can be pride. The beast here is specifically said to have had one of its heads with a mortal wound, and then the mortal wound is healed, and the whole earth marveled. And so the government seems to have taken like a heavy blow that it manages to shrug off, and it uses that to make people worship it. And that can be a literal worship, or it could be, it can be patriotism taken to the extreme. And that's not to say that patriotism is wrong. In fact, the Bible often praises people for liking where they come from. The problem is when you start to put your government in the place of God, right? The government isn't God. It's the government. It's composed of people, and people are people. They make mistakes. They don't always make the right calls. They don't always do everything perfectly. And so any human government needs to be approached with the understanding that it's not always going to do everything it should be doing. And it's certainly not going to be perfect. In the case of Rome, it's real easy to sort of point fingers at what exactly is wrong with it. Sorry, what? Oh, okay.
A light just came on. Her over Lois's headlight, she just stopped.
Oh.
It just all of a sudden went really bright.
So it's a miracle.
Lois had a
It's
thought.
a miracle.
Oh, no, so she had a thought.
In the case of Rome, which is in the context of John's writing the easiest government to pin this on, right? I mean, Rome had emperor worship. Rome thought of itself as sort of the final great empire. Um, it if you wanted to do if you wanted to be a merchant in the city of Rome from time to time, you had to engage in emperor worship, which leads to the right, verse 17, so that no one can buy or sell unless he's got the mark that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So, it's pretty easy to draw parallels to this this image here to Rome. And to be clear, I think the image is, as an idealist, I believe the image is based on Rome. Like if I guess hold a gun to my head, ask me what the first beast from the sea is. The beast from the sea is Rome. But using the image of Rome, you can then talk about any time a government is overstepping its bounds in the way that Rome kind of was, if that makes any amount of sense. So just because it is Rome, you can then talk about, but other governments do exactly what Rome was doing in slightly various ways. And you can draw the conclusion that they're going to be judged in very similar ways to how Rome was. Any other questions or comments on the beast? All right. Actually, the second beast is in many ways more fascinating to me than the first beast. I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns, like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. And it exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wounds were healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, deceive those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image of the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man, and his number is 666, or 666. All right. We talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about that number, real briefly. But the easiest way to understand that number is what does 3 represent?
Godhead or Trinity.
Okay, so that's the number of God, that or 1. And what's the number 6 represent?
Imperfection.
All right.
Full humanity.
Yeah. So it's the imperfect pretending to be perfect. It's the imperfect pretending to be God. That's the easiest interpretation of the number, and it seems to be a pretty solid interpretation of the number, especially when you're talking about a beast that has taken on the authority of God, which is essentially what it is, right? It's making people worship it. It has even, this is what I find fascinating about it. It even has a second beast working for it that is a false Christ. That's what the second beast is, because it's a lamb that speaks like a dragon. Well, how does a dragon speak?
fire.
Okay, it speaks in death. I guess I'll put it this way. When Satan first shows up in the Bible, what's he do? Okay, he tempts Eve by,
Takes on the form of a snake.
okay, but he deceives, he lies to her. So the way a dragon speaks is in lies, because it has a forked tongue. And it speaks in death, right? It's lying to you to kill you. that's how a dragon speaks. And that's not just true in the Bible, that's true like mythologically. If you have a talking dragon in like a myth, generally speaking, outside of like modern fantasies, but like generally speaking, if you have a speaking dragon in mythology, it's speaking in order to deceive you so it can kill you easy, right? It's not your friend. It's there to kill you, and that's this false lamb. The second beast is a lamb that speaks like a dragon speaks, and lies and half truths, and it tells people that they must worship the first beast. And in its deception, it's even able to make an image of the beast move and speak, and cause even more people to believe in it. And taking the Rome angle, this is generally accepted to be one of the emperors. Which one specifically is debated on. It doesn't necessarily have to be any one specific emperor, but it can be any emperor who causes the empire worship of Rome to be increased. So he's sort of the face of the beast, right? And the signs and wonders are not necessarily real signs, but anything that brings glory to Rome, and then instead of giving glory to the one who's given them all of this power and might, they heap it onto themselves. Well, look how great Rome is. Look how much we've done. Look how much of the world we conquered, right? And it's the lesson Nebuchadnezzar learns, right, when he's made into a mute, insane man who goes around eating grass like an ox and not taking care of himself for a few years. So, that's the second beast. Any questions or comments on that?
Doesn't seem as bad as the first beast, but it seems sneakier.
Right, it doesn't seem as bad at first, and then you realize it's just sort of one of the faces of the first beast, propping up the first beast, and yeah, it's sneakier, which in some ways is worse, because people don't even realize how bad it is. All right. In an interesting dichotomy, after we have this false lamb show up, we have the real lamb show up. And so that's chapter 14. Yep. Can we get someone to read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 14 there?
And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the mount front, and with him 140 and 4,000, having redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouths was found no. Okay, I don't know what that was. G-U-I-L-E?
Guile.
Okay. And they are without fault before the throne of God.
All right. The New King James renders that lie because it's a subtle difference. My interlinear ESV is in the other room, so I can't look up to see which one's more accurate. But guile includes deception and misdirection. So to guile someone, you don't even need to lie to them. You just need to omit truth, if that makes sense. Okay, to lie to someone, you have to change truth. To beguile someone, you just have to trick them. And that is a subtle difference in what the words mean, and I don't know which one's more accurate off the top of my head. But I think we can get the gist here. All right. So we're on Mount Zion, and there's the Lamb and the 144,000. So, of course, this is a callback to the 144,000 who were set aside from every tribe of the sons of Israel. We've already covered that that's not that's not all the Christians in the world, but it is representative of all Christians in the world. And so the image here is that when Christ goes to judge people, all of Christianity needs to be moving alongside him. That you need to be able to follow Christ wherever he goes, even if that's uncomfortable to you in the moment. So there were, using Rome, case in point, there were definitely Christians whose livelihoods were affected by Rome's collapse. How did they need to approach God's judgment on Rome? This wasn't a trick question. All right. So if you're a Christian, your livelihood is affected by the collapse of Rome, what should your response be towards God and his judgment?
Yeah, I get one of those.
Okay. But do you need to accept that God is judging Rome? Okay, your attitude should be one of acceptance. God has decided to judge Rome, even if it affects my livelihood. God's plan is the best plan. So that's why it's specified. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So it doesn't matter how it affects you in life. When God moves in judgment, it's the proper time for judgment to happen. You need to follow along with that. And I guess the modern day, the modern application for that would be, since we're living in the United States, if God decides to judge the United States, what should our attitudes be towards that? Will it affect us?
Sure.
Yes. what should our attitude towards that be if God decides to judge the United States?
Still following.
All right. You need to follow God wherever, regardless of whether or not he is judging the nation that you're a part of. And so that is, I think that's the entire point of bringing up the 144,000 here, is if we're talking about, whether we're talking about Rome, whether we're talking about Jerusalem, whether we're talking about some nation today, if God is judging them and bringing about their destruction, are there going to be Christians affected? Yeah, maybe famously, just like in Jerusalem, no Christians died in the judgment of Jerusalem. They still had to leave. They still had to be uprooted and leave. It definitely affected them. And that's sort of the point. Verse 4, they have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins, is a bit interesting. Most people don't take this to be literal virginity. I'm sure there's some futurist somewhere that does. But I think even the futurists tend to take a bit of a symbolic meaning here. But they haven't defiled themselves with women, standing in for sexual immorality, and sexual immorality here is standing in for all sin. And it's not that the Christians haven't sinned, it's that they are now blameless before God. They don't engage in the same sort of activities as the world is sort of what's being got at. And then that's reiterated by, in their mouth no lie or no guile is found, for they are blameless. And so we sort of have two sins standing in here for all the other sins to let us know that we're specifically talking about people who are blameless before God, and they're blameless before God because they're putting in the effort towards salvation. All right. Any questions or comments on that bit before we get on to the next bit? So I'm going to read verses 6 through 13 then.
I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having the eternal gospel preached to those who live on the earth, to every nation and tribe, and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and springs of water." And another angel, the second one, followed, saying, Fallen is Babylon the Great, she who had made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And another angel, the third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, Anyone who worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. He will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment comes up forever, and their made have no rest day and night. Those who worship the beast and his image, whoever receives the mark of his name, Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord, and now, yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, and their deeds follow with them.
Okay, so we have three angels, and the three angels each have a message. The first one says, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." And so the first angel essentially erases the message of the second beast, and that is the worship does not belong to a beast. It doesn't belong to a dragon. It belongs purely to the God, Father of all, who created heaven and earth. Right? So the first angel erases the message of the second beast. The second angel proclaims the destruction of the first beast. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. We're going to later see a more clear image of the great prostitute in chapter 17. This is the second time, this is the first time her name is mentioned. But the fact that we're in Babylon has already been mentioned because the four angels started their destruction outward from the Euphrates. If you remember, the destruction comes from within. And so here we make it clear we're in Babylon. Now, of course, Babylon here is symbolic. It's a symbolic Babylon, but it lets us know the sort of empire that we're talking about. And the third angel specifically calls judgment on those who have worshipped the beast. It's interesting, I think, to note, although it's never directly stated, the 144,000 have Christ's name and the Father's name written on their foreheads. That is directly stated in verse 1 of this chapter. And 666 is said to be the number of the name of the beast. So it's essentially the beast's name. And so the name of the beast brings death, and the name of Christ brings life. And so if you are owned by the beast, you're going to suffer eternal torment. If you're owned by Christ, you're going to engage in an eternal life. And so here's the call for endurance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And so we're told, well, keep strong, because giving in to the beast brings about real death, and being with Christ brings about real life. And the Spirit reiterates, or the voice from heaven reiterates, "Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, for they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." All right, any questions or comments up to this point? As long as you keep in mind that everything here is symbolic of something else. I actually feel that, weirdly enough, although we keep getting all of these images thrown in our face, I think this is one of the most straightforward parts of Revelation. Because it all does sort of just flow from it. And so then we have the harvest of the earth. And so this is the actual judgment of Babylon. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on a cloud, one like the Son of Man. So this is Jesus appearing, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. So he has got one crown, and he's one man like the Son of Man, which is the name Christ takes upon himself. So we know this is Christ, and with a single crown, he has all authority So it's not false authority like the beast. He doesn't need to put 10 of them on his head, or 7 of them on his head to mimic perfection. He simply needs one because he is God. And so another angel came out of the temple calling with a loud voice, who said on the cloud, "Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple in hand, and he too had a sharp sickle. Another angel came out from the altar, the angel who had authority over fire, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God, and the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle, or for 1,600 stadia. I did the math, and 1,600 stadia is about 180 miles. So, point to the preterists who think that this is Rome. 180 miles is about from one coast of Italy to the other. So, that's a real interesting little factoid there.
Got 5 feet deep, 4 feet deep.
Yeah.
That's gross.
But you can definitely take this to simply be that God's wrath it's total. Once God starts reaping and judging your nation, the wrath is total. You're not making it out, and there's no escape from a flow from a wine press that's 5 feet, 6 feet deep for 180 miles. It actually reminds me of a real thing that happened in Boston back in like 1910s. Has anyone ever heard of the Great Molasses Flood of Boston? It's a real thing that happened. It is funny, although 6 people died, so I guess not that funny. But they had a bunch of molasses in the shipyards in Boston, and it was during the cold months, like January, and they had a sudden heat snap, and everything got warm real fast, and so the molasses broke its containers because it grew in volume, flooded like 6 blocks of the city, and the molasses was so thick and high that it would literally pick up people and just throw them for like several feet just from the force of the molasses. You don't think of molasses as being forceful, but when there's that much of it to flood just tons of streets, not only was it heavy enough to basically just throw people, 6 people were completely buried, and there were lots of people who were stuck until someone could get out there with like a rope and just teams of men pulling them out of just waist-high molasses. And then they had to pump salt water from the dock to melt the molasses. And apparently sometimes in the summer you can still smell molasses in that area of the city. It was that bad.
They're slower than molasses in January, is that where they came from?
I guess. But when the molasses is moving about 30 miles an hour, it's not that slow. But yeah, I mean, wine that deep would also be more destructive, actually, than even the molasses. But I mean, I feel like this is pretty straightforward. Jesus comes in judgment over the nation that he's judging. He sweeps his sickle, and the earth is reaped. And then he sends an angel to go finish up, and they press the wine, and the wrath of God flows 5 feet deep for 180 miles. It, I mean, it's pretty hard to get more clear than that image. When God comes in judgment, there's not really any escape. All right. Sorry, someone say something? Well, the grapes are the grapes of the earth are rather representative of people being tossed into the wine press. I don't think it means that at the end of days Christ is going to come and throw a bunch of people into a wine press and stomp on them like grapes. That does not seem to me to be what he's getting at. I think it's symbolic of God's judgment, and when it comes, it's complete. All right. Any questions or comments at all before we get into the divergent takes on this? All right. I will see how much I can cover in the next 5 minutes, but I suspect what we're going to end up doing with the divergent takes on this section, being that it's the longest section, we'll go ahead and spend an entire week on the divergent takes. I'll bring in a book I have called it's, I'm not going to remember the exact title, but essentially the book is these 4 views of Revelation broke down section by section of how different people take these different things, complete with citations to people from these different views. The guy having done extensive research and compiled this book. So next week I will go ahead and bring in that book, and I guess we'll just spend the whole time reading through the different sections and getting a feel for how exactly people break this particular bit down. Because I really focus on the historical one on this one, and I guess the preterist as well. But even with as big as those particular sections are, I didn't really do justice to those views. So I think spending a week on the entire section here and breaking down how people break it down is going to be good. And then we'll get into, what is this? This is lesson 6 here. So we'll get into lesson 7 in 2 weeks. We'll start on the 7 bowls. But real quick, on the historical side, the historists, they take the first trumpet to be the judgment on the Western Empire of Rome after the split until its fall in 476. The second trumpet is the Vandals who destroyed the Western Roman Empire. And so what you'll see here is everyone sort of takes the first 4 trumpets here to sort of be a group, just like I mentioned that they were. And so while the first trumpet is a declaration of the judgment on the Western Empire, the second trumpet is the Vandals who destroyed the Western Roman Empire. And if we go back and we look at that, let's see here. Yeah. So the first trumpet, there's hail and fire mixed with blood, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and the green grass was burned up. And so that's just, the historists just take that to be a general symbolism of the destruction of the Western Empire. The second trumpet, there's a great mountain burning with fire extending into the sea, and a third of the living creatures of the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. And so the Vandals sort of came in and destroyed a lot of the infrastructure. The third trumpet's the Huns under Attila, who come out of nowhere. And they can make a... let's see. Third angel, great star falls from heaven, burning like a torch. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. And so then the fourth trumpet is viewed as the collapse of Rome, with its laws and orders being represented by the stars. And so the next three trumpets deal with the Eastern Roman Empire and the woe that is its fall, since it lasted so much longer than the Western side of the empire. With the fifth trumpet being the sound that calls forth the Arabian Muslim to wreak havoc on the people of the Eastern Empire. And apparently, it's not a terrible image, because the locusts that are talked about actually have a lot in common with the Arabian men of that day, as they often wore their hair long and often wore turbans that could be interpreted as the crowns that the locusts were wearing, and they rode horses, so having locusts the size of horses would make sense as a depiction of them. And they're destroying everything in their path, like locusts often do. But they're not given the power to destroy, and so they don't actually destroy the Eastern Empire. The sixth trumpet is the Turkish Empire overrunning and overthrowing the Byzantine Empire, with the time period being seen as directly symbolic, because it mentions a time frame of, let's see, where is that? Yes, for an hour, a day, a month, and a year. I kind of already broke that down, but they view a year as 365 or 360 years, a month as 30 years, a week or a day as a year, and an hour as, what is that? 24th of a year, so about half a month. And so they view this time period as being directly symbolic, and it fits rather neatly into the time period in question between when the Arabs attacked and then when the Turkish Empire finally overrun the Byzantine Empire. Around the time that this happened, right, we have the angel and the little scroll, or the little book that tastes sweet and sits bitter. That's the Bible being published by a press for the first time. The seven thunders are the seven crusades and some other things. John is told to measure the temple, because with the advent of the printing press, people are measuring the Catholic Church for the first time and finding it wanting. The two witnesses are the real Christians who've not bowed the knee to the papacy, and they go about, and then people receive plagues when they're abused and mistreated. Going back in time, the dragon is viewed as imperial Rome, and the male child is Constantine for some reason, despite the fact it's directly called as being Satan. The woman flees back to the wilderness, which is less piety under Constantine rule, and then given wings, bringing her back up. God then protects the true Christians until such time as they could be public about their beliefs again, hence her running around. Everyone agrees that the first beast is Rome, and the people worshiping the Roman Empire as emperor as God. The second beast is seen as the papacy, directly directing people to worship the Pope, who's replaced the emperor. Jesus removes the power of the papacy, and all as well as the judgment is poured out. Some view it as judgment on Italy being about 200 miles wide, or a final judgment on the Catholic Church as a whole. So like I said, I don't think the historical take is quite right, but there's a lot of coincidences that work out in their favor. All right. But that's all that we've got time for tonight. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside and get back to it next week.